This podcast is brought to you by Firehouse Subs, firefighter-founded hot sub chain with a passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. Ready for your next mission? Firehouse Subs is offering firefighters the opportunity to continue serving after service now as restaurant owners. Learn more at www.firehouseSubsfranchising.com. We are live today from FDIC with Frank Ricci, PJ Norwood from Politics and Tactics, and then my co-host, Dan Degryse.
Hey,
from Mental Health Monthly.
Hey, just so everybody knows, that was just one cut. That was it.
Just
fantastic.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I'm hungry.
Very good, Chris.
I'm hungry. I'm going out to get a Firehouse sub.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's going great.
Yeah. Dan?
Hey, happy to be here at FDIC, man.
Day one.
Day one.
Packed house this morning.
Opening ceremony.
Yeah, great FDIC so far. Pre-conference classes were absolutely jam-packed. I think David Rhodes hit it out of the park again, and Mike Ciampo, he hit a grand slam today. It's great opening ceremonies. Looking forward to the rest of the week of a lot of learning and sharing.
Yeah, and if you missed the opening ceremonies today, get there early tomorrow because it'll be packed again. Standing room only.
Yep. And if you're home listening, look at the recorded version on fireengineering.com.
Yeah.
Don't miss out.
It's an honor to be on the Mental Health Show. We're all excited to be here.
This is a combination show.
Fair enough. You're taking the lead, Chief.
No, not at all. But if you remember going back 7 years ago, you were part of my keynote.
One of the highest honors to have a Chicago legend put up a quote from a keynote that I probably stole from somewhere else, but then he put it up there and I was like, wow, I got to go meet that guy. So, and then Daniel ended up writing a back section in a book that PJ contributed to, Command Presence.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, we didn't know him yet. He wasn't around. He might not even been born when we did
Well,
that
Generation
book
Alpha,
2 years
right?
ago. So,
Basically.
We're getting there.
but
He's
it's an
coming.
honor to be here with you.
No, same here. And again, putting together stuff, right? A lot of times we have a tendency to borrow and sometimes steal. I didn't have your number at the time, but I had your name. I remember talking to Bobby Halton and saying, hey, listen, I'm going to use a couple of quotes out there, and one happened to be yours. And then we got to meet afterwards. It's been some time in between, and now here we are together, thanks to Mark and Firefighter Nation and Fire Engineering. We get to talk together about whatever we want to talk about.
We're going to talk about mental health. This is your
right.
show. We're going to let you guys take it, and PJ and I will add in where we can and
Yeah, I think,
disagree with Chris as much as possible.
See how much resilience he has, right?
yeah. I think it's awesome, especially for someone like me that's younger than you guys. You notice how I said younger? I didn't call you old.
That's
So,
starting off. You read this again, okay?
But mental health, right? You heard it talked about a lot this morning. You hear it talk about more and more in fire academies and firehouses and things like that. And there's this happy balance of like you're not overbearing with it, but it's definitely something important, right?
It's absolutely important because it affects everybody on every job in America.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when Bobby was here, he talked about it. Chief Rhodes talked about it in his keynote last year. Mike Ciampo spoke about it today, and even Enzo touched on it. So a question for you two guys, all right? And let's, before we go any further, classes. What did you already do your class, or is it coming up?
Yeah, I taught already yesterday.
Okay.
I had a workshop yesterday. It was my first year at FDIC. I didn't have to grab homeless from outside to fill the seats like the Oscars. So it was a great workshop, and so we're done for the week.
Oh, okay. Very good. Mental health, mental wellness. Thoughts?
Yeah, so, mental health is definitely something we should be focused on in the fire service, but like as already mentioned, not being overbearing. When I first started the fire service, it was, suck it up, buttercup. If you can't deal with it, you don't belong in this business. And unfortunately for me, I was too young. I was 14 years old and I started responding, so that the traumas that hit me at a young age impacted me the way that it shouldn't. I'm a big advocate of explorers and cadet programs, but we have to make sure that we're being cognizant of their mental health at that young age. For my role now, the state training director, the director of training at Connecticut Fire Academy, I'm aware of it, but what we found out is our recruits, who are all hired by municipalities, they're all coming in the door with something, right? They all have something. All their departments have peer support teams. All the departments have EAP, but they're the probie. They're still in recruit school. and they still have a fear of reaching out to their peer teams or their EAP providers because they don't want to start out in their mind off on the wrong foot. So we actually had to hire and bring in a non-denominational chaplain to be with them and meet with them on a regular basis. He checks in with every single recruit every Sunday evening before they come back for the week, ask them, how their weekend was with their family, what challenges have they had over the weekend, to help us get a better handle so we're starting their career off right, making sure that we're being proactive, not catering to them, not giving everybody an excuse, but making sure that we understand what they're coming to the table with so we can make sure that we're taking care of them as probationary firefighters and setting them off on the right step going to their different departments across the entire state.
So over the last 10 years here and probably longer, we've been talking about behavioral health. We're using the word mental wellness or mental health, which again has and we're going to get to you, Frank, is there's a stigma associated with it. One of the things that we're trying to break through with the culture and the leadership and a proactive approach is not just addressing it when the problem happens, but before. You being the state training director, one of the things that everybody that we speak to talk about, let's start from the beginning and work through all the way into not just at retirement, but through retirement, because that's another aspect of discussion which we can talk about at some point. Is it a part of the fabric of the current structure for the state of Connecticut to have it from the beginning and throughout?
Yes.
And so I think you said it with you added some stuff, but it has been and it will be.
It has been. There's legislation requiring us to make sure that we provide our recruits at the recruit level mental health awareness training right from day one. So it's embedded in the culture of our recruit programs, and now we've taken it a little bit further to make sure that it's not just a class, it's part of the culture of the recruit program.
What's the requirement?
The requirement is that we provide 4 hours of mental health training or education to each recruit. So we use like some of the NFFF programs.
Okay, annually?
Every recruit program.
Every recruit program.
Yeah, so
okay.
the municipalities across the state hire their recruits and they send them to us for Proby School. So they come to us for 15 weeks, and during that 15 weeks, we provide them a 4-hour classroom. But now we're also embedding this non-denominational chaplain to meet with them on a regular basis and be there for them.
Nice. No, the reason I ask is because I know that other states are starting to require it as a mandate annually as well, so that's not just a one and done or after effect or checking the box per se. So,
But
Frank,
it shouldn't be something that has to be mandated. It's common sense.
Right.
We got to take care of each other. I mean, it's basically that simple. I don't need the government to say I need to take care of the guy or girl
Right.
next to me.
right. How were you taken care of? So we were around the same generation, right?
That's a polite way to put it.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
I'm caught in the middle.
and not necessarily going back, but currently, what has been favorable that you've seen? Because I know that you have been and you continue to be at the forefront of training and education, and I'm assuming that some aspect of that is behavioral health, mental wellness. How have you seen that, and how have you incorporated that in your training, if at all?
Well, on a national level, one of the things in our leadership program and covered in the book is we talk about the importance of this type of training. And one of the things that I've been surprised about recently is I started asking in my classes, and at FDIC, the great thing about FDIC is when you teach here, you have like representatives from every state.
Yeah.
So you can it's like a real poll of what's going on. But only like 1/3 of the class has supervisory referrals for, now I know we want to get them at the academy and we want to build that culture, but the officer has a responsibility. You get that badge, it's not because you're the highest paid firefighter. It means that you got to be responsible, and sometimes you got to be the bad guy. But every department in the country should train their supervisors to recognize drugs, alcohol, and when necessary, send an employee for at least the one mandatory first visit with a counselor to try to get the person back on track. Because unfortunately in America, you're not going to save everybody, but I've seen individuals multiple where the officer had the courage to do their job. We shouldn't need the courage to do our job, but the officer had the courage, wrote it up, send the individual to counseling, somebody who was on the downward slide, and they came back as the most valuable player. So I think that we really need to move to make sure that supervisors are getting properly trained to recognize it when the culture fails, in a sense.
And the other thing I would tag on to that is not just to recognize it, but educate them on how to ask the questions. You know, I had somebody very close to me who I knew was not in a good place, and I didn't know how to ask the question if he was thinking about hurting himself. And what did he do? He committed suicide. Because I didn't know how to ask that question. And also, kind of afraid to ask that question, right? Because when you ask that, you have to be prepared for that person to say, yes, I have thought of that. So we can train our officers all day long to be aware, but we also have to give them the tools to ask those questions. And then when you get that answer that you don't want, what do you do with that?
So I think you make a really good point, because we've talked about this before, and I kind of stole it from Dan, but it's when you're talking to someone, what do most firemen say? Hey, man, you good? And what are they expecting you to say? Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I think people say, hey, you good? Because they're expecting you to say yes. And when you don't, they're like, oh, what do I do?
Where do I go from there?
Where's the right? And so one thing I really try to do, and it's not easy all the time, is I say, hey, how are you? How you doing? You leave it more open-ended, because we're firemen. Hey, you good? Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. And going back for a second on the academy, you have the two parts, right? You have the academy from the get-go, instilling it, and then the company officer, right? It's cool that more and more states and academies are making it part of it. I just wrote an article that will be coming out soon, hopefully, but it's basically mental health in the first year, the roadmap. We're really, really good in the academies at stretching lines and cutting holes and throwing ladders and search and VEIS, right? But what about the mental health piece of it? So when they do make that run and it's not a good one, how are they affected? And then with the company officer thing, you have the individual in crisis, but then what about the call where the whole crew's affected? And that's tough, because you have maybe 5, 6, 7 guys on your crew, 5, 6, 7 different personalities. Might affect this guy, but it doesn't affect that guy. And as a company officer, you're like, well, I'm good, so my crew's good. But are they? Right?
So I'd be remiss if I didn't pick up on what you mentioned about suicide. So as Chief Rhodes mentioned this morning about Bill Guston, you know, God rest his soul, right? Died by suicide. That's impactful. Not only for the family, and we really, and I'm just using Bill for an example. In my career, we had 60 of our members, active and retired, from my department die by suicide.
Wow.
Every one of those was impactful. When you meet the family or the friends or the coworkers, the disbelief, the anger, the frustration, the sadness, it can't be him. Here's a guy, Bill Guston, bigger than life, right? If you put him with 10,000 other people, you would be like, no way. No
Absolutely.
way
You're 100% right,
would
man.
he do that. I'm not here to give everybody the answer, but actually have that conversation in the sense of what can we do to address this. And I was talking to some people, and I'm a believer liars figure and figures lie. Something for the future of the fire service to keep in mind is that, you know, there are some figures in there in regards to firefighter suicide, but in the nation, the incident rate has increased almost 40% over the last 20 years. That's a significant increase. Now, if you look at populations, and if you look at the fact that I've been retired 5 years, you got a few of the baby boomers left. You have millennials, you have Generation X, now you're gonna have Generation Alpha. If you look at kids ages 10 and 14, which is Generation Alpha, that'll be coming in the fire service as explorers and as new candidates and so forth, their incident rate has increased in the last year 300% for suicide. Wow. 300%. So going back to, and again, I'm not going to try to catastrophize the fire service either, but when we talk about making education and training and a proactive aspect from the academies going forward, it's great to hear Connecticut talking about it. I know Illinois is doing it. But there are 35,000 fire departments across the country, right? How do we make that the fabric for everybody so that 300 number doesn't transcend into the fire service? We're exposed to the things that we're exposed to and don't have the support factors, and that number continues. I know I gave you a lot to think about on that. You're like, 300, if you look at the market, right? The market just went down 15%, and we're looking at guys like us that have money in there. Well, I don't need it right now, but that's scary. 300%, when I looked at it, was incredibly scary.
The market's coming back, and we're going to help those kids out.
Let's lift everybody up. It's more of a statement, but a continuation of talking. Well, again, going back to Bill Gustin, I don't even know how to actually discuss this on a radio show per se, but people need to be able to have that conversation in the sense of that nobody probably saw that coming.
I think that's fair to say, because he was bigger than life, and he was a student. And knowing Bill for years, I know that he would want this to help somebody else, because that's all he was about, was helping other people. And I think that you talked about when guys and girls retire, that's got to be a piece of it, because a lot of people, being a firefighter isn't something you do, it's something you are, and they have that kind of loss of purpose of what do I do? What's the next thing? So I think that's an important thing that is missing.
And I think you see it. So I was a military guy before I was fire.
Thank you for your
service. Thank you. And it's very similar, right? You see guys that get out of the military, and they feel they combat guys or whatever, and they lost their sense of purpose. It's the same thing that you're seeing in the military, and I think that it's great that it's being incorporated in academies, and we're doing all those things. But to your point, a little bit, like, mental health is really just starting to take off at a rapid level, I think, in the fire service. So how do we capture those guys that have been doing it 10, 15, 20 years that are still, like you guys, right? That, it wasn't a thing when you went to academy and it wasn't talked about, and 15 years ago you made the run, or you were having a bad day at home and you came back to the station and you're like, I'm not going to say anything, right? Or 15 years ago you're sitting at the firehouse table where all the world's problems are solved, and somebody drops a mental health topic or a mental health conversation, and what happens at the kitchen table?
Let me be real honest. I'm sure Frank will be too. That didn't come up at all.
That wasn't part of the conversation. And let's be honest, right now with your generation ruining the fire service, the kids, they don't even talk at the table. They're on their phone. So one thing that one of our chiefs, Bobby Gahuli, did, and this was like before it even got crazy, was he said, when you sit at the table, you're at my table, there are no phones. Yeah. And he got everybody, everybody's in their silos now. Everybody goes into this room, in that room. He got everybody eating, and that's a good way to check on, if you're a company officer, that's a good way to check on your personnel, not only to go over the day, but maybe bring up that uncomfortable topic. But I've never heard mental health brought up at the
and I think the reality of it is,
as he's talking, I'm looking at Ray like, no, that wasn't a discussion.
Moving forward, it has to be non-negotiable. It can't not be, like, we know the acuity of calls is going up, the frequency of the high acuity calls, the things that you're seeing on a regular basis, the challenges just in outside the fire service life with the stock markets and all these things that's making life challenging, right? Like, it's a dangerous job. We heard it this morning. We know it's a dangerous job.
It's the greatest job, though.
It's the greatest job,
right.
But you have to take care of yourself.
Correct, but and this isn't saying that this generation is bad.
No,
It's
I was
different.
just harassing Chris here.
Yeah, where I'm going with that, but the generation that's coming in is less resilient.
Yeah.
When we grew up, if we got into a disagreement, we went to the playgrounds, we fought it out.
Yeah.
You take a few punches in the nose, a couple get a fat lips, you got up, you cleaned yourself off, and you went on your way. Or you would have a courageous conversation, have a disagreement, you would have a toe-to-toe dispute, right? And you'd be done. The generation coming in the fire service hasn't had that opportunity because of social media.
They cancel each other.
They are canceled, or they delete each other, or they block each other.
Yeah.
So they're coming in my opinion, less resilient into our environment into the fire service, which you have to be extremely resilient. So we have to understand that, recognize that, and make sure that we're providing them some resiliency training, because they're not getting it like we got it in the playgrounds.
And sometimes they're a little bit too in their own head. And
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I don't say this, because I am a firm believer in, like, I'm not the one you want to talk to, but I used to send my guys in New Haven to PJ. So I at least know how to cover my blind spots. And I'd be like, you need to go talk to PJ when something goes wrong. I'd bring him in to the city and got a lot of flack for it in doing it. But there's something, it's kind of like the pendulum of injustice. We're either nothing or too much, but there's got to be some middle ground too. And two things that I think are real important in the academy that I don't think gets talked about enough, and I think you could probably even speak to this, is that when your company or your fire department saves a life on a fire, but somebody else dies, firefighters have a hard time reconciling that their greatest moment when their company saved a life at a house fire, but yet two people perished or a kid perished. Nobody seems to talk about that component. And then the other thing I just want to throw out there is we need to take care of each other 100%, but we also need to say in the academy that we need to take care of you after the fire. You have to perform for the citizens for that 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then we can slow everything down, check up on you, the text message, the phone call, but you have to perform at the fire. We are seeing, kid at the bottom of the pool, paramedic throwing up instead of getting in the pool to get the kid out. Really? Line of duty death in New Haven. Firefighter Matt Thomas is pulling an unconscious lieutenant to the window, calling in for the firefighter on the ladder to get in the window, and the firefighter's crying. I'm sorry, this job is not for you. That not everybody can be a firefighter, but after the fire, get with PJ, get counseling. It's okay to ask for help on this job. Help shouldn't be, that 4-letter word. It should be, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have these feelings, but you need to perform.
No, I was going to go back before I forget, because my memory isn't always the best. But what PJ mentioned when you were talking about that conflict, right? Conflict isn't necessarily bad. There's resolutions that come out of that if you're willing to work through it. I got a buddy, I'll remain nameless, but
just tell us the last name.
He super guy, but we had a conflict, and we had a scrap. And to this day, 36 years later, best friends, right?
I like how you put it better than I did. You got a scrap.
That didn't end our relationship. That actually bolstered our relationship, and we talked about that later, as opposed to like saying, okay, he disagreed with me or I disagree with him. We punched each other, and now we're not talking to each other ever again. That wasn't the mentality that we had back then. So how do we encourage the younger generation to understand that it's okay to have conflict, and then we got to move forward? And speaking of younger generation,
You speak for
it's
everyone.
$1 million question. It's $1 million question, right? But I think something that you said earlier, you talked about the older generation and resiliency and courageous, and words you threw out, and courageous stuck with me, right? So that's the older generation. And I think for my generation, if we will, I'll say it, is we a lot of times we tiptoe around this mental health thing, right? Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do, it's not pulling someone out of the house fire. It's, hey man, you're not good. No, I'm fine. No, you're not. And you're not getting on this rig today, right? Like, people are counting on you, and you don't get to, I guess you get to do whatever you want, but you don't want to be the person that looks that family member in the eye or that crew's wife in the eye and go, I'm sorry I wasn't right and I couldn't make the grab, or my mind was here and I didn't make the stretch. So courageous is also, like, to me, being courageous is like, if you're afraid to talk about mental health or you're afraid to call your buddy out, you're not courageous. In our generation, like, it's part of it. Like, I was a military guy. Like, it's part of it. People are counting on you. Like, it's just the world that we live in. But I feel like, again, with my generation, it's like you bring up the mental health topic and people are worried about policy or personal rights, or, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we can't. If you tell PJ he's not good and he can't, and you're going to the HR and the chief, like, what's right and what's wrong, right? It's kind of a little tangent.
And we
but
usually know what's right and what's wrong, but a lot of people don't have the courage because when you say it to somebody, and I failed a couple times throughout my career early on where I knew somebody had a problem and I didn't say it, so I'm not blameless in this at all. I've gotten much better as the career went up, but when you say to somebody that they're not right, guess what? They never agree with you. Or at least I've never seen anybody agree with you. They put you as now all of a sudden you're the bad guy, you're ruining their career.
You mean nobody ever said, Frank, thanks for telling me, I never knew that? And I really appreciate that.
Well, here, I'll tell you a little quick story because you just said that. So New Year's Eve, I'm driving truck 4, acting officer, and we get a call for a box with kids trapped. So get to the piece as fast as I can, and the officer's not coming down. So I looked at the firefighter and the irons on the Seagrave. I said, let's go, we're going. And as we started pulling out, he started running to the piece. And as he got in, he started punching me. I have a lot of that going around. So the Seagrave's got that smooth seat, so I'm actually trying to throw map books at him as I drive. And the irons firefighter, got that big sliding window, is in the cab holding him back. So I go up to the battalion chief after fire and I go, Chief, we got a problem. Told him everything that happened. His answer was, Frank, you're going to tiller for the rest of the night. Brian's going to drive, and we'll put Lewis, we'll stay where he is in the front. So I wrote the letter to the chief to get him and to HR. They sent him away. So I'm like, okay. 3 months later, he's like 6'4", shows up in the watch booth with only one door out, and I'm like, he is going to kill me. He says, Frank, I just want to thank you. And now he's a counselor.
Oh, man.
So that's a true story.
Appreciate that, yeah. It doesn't always have to be like that in the beginning. It could be a lot easier, but...
but we knew that he had a problem for years, and we ignored it.
I meant the punching and all that.
I failed. Oh, yeah.
But how hard was it for you to write that letter or go to the battalion chief?
Oh, it was extremely hard because I knew I was going to be the bad guy. But that's why I say when you're in a position of leadership, you have to do that. But I ignored it. The boss ignored it. When we were coming out of recruit school, you take tours of all the city firehouses. So we went to that firehouse, and that was the shift that I ended up being on. And after, when we got back on the bus for the academy, one of the kids said, it's so nice that they let that homeless guy sleep on the couch in the firehouse. No, that was him. He had a problem before we even got there. And nobody had the courage to have that tough conversation, to take responsibility. But you have to do it. You have to do it.
Well, I love that story. I'm always known as like the Debbie Downer in a sense, and I have a guy, unfortunately, that one of many who died alcohol-related death off the job. But I remember, like it was yesterday, his 3 girls, beautiful 3 girls that came up to me and said, my nickname was Double D in the house because Dan Degryse, and they said, hey, Double D, thanks. We know you tried to do everything you could for our father. And I remember having the whole company, and it wasn't just me, it was 12 other guys in the bunk room trying to do an intervention with this individual to get him to see the light and to stop drinking. And he didn't. He ended up dying of cirrhosis of the liver at 55 and leaving,
55?
at 55. Great fireman, great person, great human being, just had a disease. And we tried to do what we could. And ultimately, as we know with some don't accept the help. It's great to hear your story. 2 things. One is family can survive too and be resilient despite the individual not changing. Chris and I just had this conversation about our own personal life and our wives sticking next to us and supporting us. But your story was the individual in question ended up changing and being even more successful. So from a firefighter standpoint, it's okay to have this conversation openly at the firehouse, behind closed doors, at FDIC, in classroom, to support not only the individual but the family, and it doesn't have to be a negative outcome.
I think something else too. I might be the elephant in the room saying this, but there's also this individual responsibility, right? Like you know, you've all heard, like, you can lead the horse to water, you can't force them to drink. Like, department's going to give you resources. The state academy is giving you resources. There's peer support, SISM teams, counseling, EAP, all these things. But, and I'll preface this with, I didn't always get this right, military or fire career, is, like, don't be the victim. Like, you have a responsibility. The resources are out there. The help is out there, right? Like, you have to want help. You want, and it's not just help, like, maintain. Like, I go to counseling pretty regularly. Like, that's no secret. People know that. I'm proud of it. And I've told Dan this before, like, I don't build my counseling around my schedule. I build my schedule around counseling, right? And, like, that's my maintenance. Like, and there's plenty of weeks I go to counseling and there's nothing wrong. And we talk about sports, life, kids, family, whatever it is. And then there's weeks where it's like, I'm mad at something or whatever, right? So
At the end?
Yeah.
No,
You have to, but you
I'll go down a tangent here.
Yeah,
We're talking
you-
about when it gets cold in Texas, and he calls me up.
Oh,
That's when he calls
it's
me.
freezing. It's like
Yeah,
40
when it's
there right
like
now. It's like freezing.
55 degrees. Go ahead.
But the point being is, and this is like, I'm really talking to my generation, and this part is like stop being a victim. Like, you ran a bad call, great. You're having problems on the home front with your spouse, great. Your kids getting in trouble, like those things. It's life.
It's life.
It's life, right? Like, you're having a bad day, you're not having a bad life.
All right. So
What are you gonna do
Not
to-
to be again. I feel like the Debbie Downer here. So what Frank mentioned earlier about the saves and the loss, right? We are at very capable individuals, and I'm going to try to say this in a positive light. And I'm speaking honestly for us four here too, and a lot of members out there, is that we can save 99 people, but we have a tendency to focus on the one that we lost. And I know in my career that I haven't always been successful there, and that's how all the confidence courses were created, because of loss of life and mistakes and the NIOSH 5 and all that stuff out there. But kind of like what Chris just said, each of us, me included, have to take responsibility and accountability for our own actions. I'm not a big leadership type person or to talk about that. I know that for me,
You absolutely are a big leadership person. You lead by example.
I am as fallible as the next person, but it has to be intentional for each of us to move that needle. How kind of how we started is that, I mean, both of you have been in a position, and both you have a podcast, and both of you teach here with the intent to offer what people have freely given to you, in a sense, based on positive and I wouldn't say negative experiences, but conflictual
Both
experiences, right? And that's got to be part of what our career is. It's not all fluffy. It's not all sad. I have to have this little conversation in any conversation that I have with anybody else, because the fire service, again, is, in my opinion, saved my life, is the greatest job in the world, can be, but we have to be intentional about that, right? Kind of like what Chief Rhodes talked about in regards to training, right? And we can risk our safety within reason, based on our training, to save lives. So how are we going to, and I'm not going to get into, part of the conversation is, how do we do that in this, I'll give you a stat, right? In the nation, 65% of people believe that their greatest stress comes from work. 75% believe it's significant, or no, it's the other way around. 75% people believe their work comes, or their stress comes from work. 65% believe it's significant. Now, if we're not creating resilient people in the academy throughout the country, both volunteer combination and full-time departments, then we're not doing our job, right? And I'm not looking at you guys as what, it's collectively all of us. So I appreciate, you say me, and I don't ever look at it myself in a sense. I'm going to be gone in probably 4 or 5 years. We need to, how do you?
I might not make it through the night.
How do we, well, if
That
you
was
keep
evident
fighting with
today.
people, but how do we bring the next, right, the next group, the millennials to the Generation X's to here to then continue the conversation that took some of us the better part of our career to have these discussions.
You two are doing it. You're talking about it. You're talking about it every month. You're writing articles. You're here at FDIC. That didn't happen 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the resiliency wasn't there. It was a different time, different generations, right? But this wasn't a topic that would be on the floor of FDIC in an open forum, being broadcast out over the speakers on the show floor here, right? So you guys are doing that, right? It's kind of like the second time that question has kind of been asked, like, what do we do? We're doing it. My class yesterday, 4 hours on the evolving fireground, research-based tactics. When I get into the command piece, I talk about the AAR and how important it is for the company officer to have that, the tailboard. And they may not need to talk about the incident, but the officer needs to be able to look each one of his members in the eyes to see if they're okay before they go back to the firehouse.
Yeah.
So we're doing it. Frank's class has it. My class has it. You guys are doing this every month. So we're doing it. We just have to continue doing that and do it better than we are each day.
No, I love you saying AAR, because I've often used that in some of the behavioral health trainings we do. Do we do an after action? It doesn't have to be, and I could go down a rabbit hole in a sense, is that typically, and I'm assuming you don't, but most people will start an after action with what they did wrong. Good leaders will start with what they did right and then work to maybe the things they need to correct.
Start positive, end positive.
I love that.
I'll be the dissenting view, okay?
I find that hard to believe.
I found as a boss for that AR, start off with, and this just worked for me, there's no wrong answers here, but I found as a boss to start off with what I did wrong or what I would have did different in hindsight, and then once you do that, all of a sudden, the rest of the crew, it gives them permission to have that conversation, and then I always end on the positive note of what an individual did and then kind of sticking them out. So
I love that.
It's a different thing, but I found a lot of after-action reviews just, it's like a lot of talk, but not, we do a lot of talking, but we don't do a lot of communication. So if you're having a purposeful after-action review, then I agree with you. But I do it a little differently.
And I totally agree. I think they're both favorable, and I should have said directing as opposed to leading off, which is more of a modeling and a mentoring aspect. So you add an additional aspect, which I'm sure is in your 4-hour class. Starting off with, hey, I can do better, allows that, kind of like what we do in a conversation, as Chris just shared, being in counseling. He doesn't do that from a negative standpoint. He does it from a more positive and intentional standpoint to keep him at his peak and at his best, as opposed to waiting for the rig to break down, kind of which happened in Chicago every single day, as you heard Mike talk about. Yeah,
Frank, and I don't disagree with you. Because our departments worked right next to each other. Our mission was the same. But how you got there with 20 to 30 members was very different than how I got there with 12 members. You would have your shift.
Same street.
We'd have a 3-wood, and you get 30 members. Then one next door, would get 12, right?
Really?
It was just the way that it worked. So
Yeah.
it's just like our tactics, right? The end goal is always the same, but how we get there is going to be different. Right? Our tactics are always going to be a little bit different based on the department, based on the environment, based on the number of people. And it's the same with this. You're getting the same result as I would, right? But we had we were a smaller group, so they would know what I was doing at my AARs. I didn't have to, kind of put up that smoke to, mirrors like you may have had to, because you had a lot more members. You didn't come in daily contact with everybody you would work with every day, where I did.
I think something else too that you guys all bring up good points, and Dan mentioned the counseling and me doing that. There was plenty of times I didn't get it right? And going back to tactics, just like on the fire ground, right? Like we assess, we intervene, right? Like if it's not working, we got to change something. And there was a lot of times that I didn't do it right and I didn't change and it didn't get any better. And then, a few years ago, I ran a call that was a once-in-a-career call, hopefully. And not that I was necessarily in a bad place. I just knew things I tried in the past to cope or handle it or whatever you want to call it didn't work. And so I knew I had to be like courageous enough, humble enough to try something different. And not that I was in a bad place, but I said, I'm going to do this counseling and this is the regimen I'm going to do it in because I don't want to wind up where I was. Right? And so Yeah, if you're on a fire and you're doing this operation and it's not working and you're the chief commanding it from the yard, what are you going to do? You're going to make a change. And so I think people have to recognize, like, if I'm having a bad day or I'm going through a rough patch and whatever you're doing isn't working, like, you have to be open-minded and be able to change. But I think the responsibility for us lies within ourselves, first and foremost, right? And with the resources and articles, and we talk about it on our show, right? Like, maybe you don't have a peer support team or you don't have a CISM. Listen, there's IFF resources, there's neighboring departments, there's articles, there's website, like, it's 2025.
And sometimes the neighboring department is more effective at helping your locality than using your own. Like I said, New Haven, we reached out to PJ so many times. PJ is like a hero in my book. He's helped so many people in New Haven, and I've gotten so many calls for people that say not only did he come talk to us, he followed up the next day. And I think if I had a peer team from New Haven, I don't think they would have been as open. But again, it's not one size fits all.
You bring up a really good point. We went through that incident a few years ago, and it was a pretty big incident. And we have a pretty well-respected, well-established peer support team, and they brought in a team from a completely different department, right? And so
sometimes you need that anonymity to open up to somebody, but also sometimes you need to be comfortable with that person, right? So bringing somebody in from the outside that you've never crossed, you don't have that trust.
Right.
But being neighboring departments, his members knew who I was. I knew who his members were. We weren't close. A lot of us, I had some friends, but hey, that's who that is. We know we can trust him, or vice versa.
And he was never part of rumor mill. So if you take on a responsibility, there are certain things at work that always have to be, you can't unring the bell that as a boss, you have to report up. But some things you don't have to report up, and sometimes you got to keep confidentiality. And if you break that trust, and you break your future effectiveness of actually trying to help somebody. And that was great with PJ is that everybody they began to trust him because they knew he was helping people, but they were never hearing about it anywhere.
Yeah, trust is important, and I think something that we talk about too is it all goes back to what you guys are saying of sending the right person to the right situation. Even in my own department, our peer support team, something happens, right? They put it out, who's available. Like, you need to be able, just because the first guy responded, said he's available, he might not be the best guy to go out to that firehouse or that situation or that individual. And so, there's so much you can do within your own organization that you don't have to have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. And I'm not knocking any of that stuff.
No, you got to care.
You got it, right? You can put together a whole program with very little funding, little bit of training, right?
Well,
like this guy.
I don't know what you're talking. Well, I have very little funding because I put 4 kids through college.
No, I'm saying as a resource, right? Like, you have somebody like this. He's not going to tell you this, but you could call him and he'd help you write an entire program. Like, you don't have to go to school for 4 years to figure it out.
Well, what I hear is that you don't have to do it alone, and that's what's cool. You mentioned it, Frank, in a sense of your size department helping another size department. For us in Chicago, we have 97 firehouses, 24
you're
battalions.
A lot bigger.
But no, here's the point, is that that one house doesn't have to do it alone. That one battalion doesn't have to do it alone. When we lost a guy out of my firehouse when I was the 1st Battalion, I was part of that incident. So I couldn't help. I could help, but I needed to ask for help outside of my battalion and realize that I was part of that incident. When we had a double line of duty death back in 2008, I was unaware at the time exactly how to traverse that. So I reached out to my buddy, Frank Lito out of New York, and said, hey, can you help me? Those things are not necessarily, we've been taught in the academy, don't give up the pipe, don't give up your tools, don't give up the fire, but in a behavioral health, mental wellness, brother and sisterhood, to support each other, you can't do it alone. You shouldn't have to do it alone, and it's okay to ask your brethren, whether it's in the same department, different battalion, different state, to help.
And you never know what kind of help you're going to get. After that line of duty death that we talked about in New Haven, where the firefighter tragically died, I reached out to Dennis Rubin, because I knew that as a chief he dealt with line of duty deaths. And one of the things he suggested is, he goes, Frank, one of the best things I did, and he got it from Brunacini, is he said, we brought all the companies through, and we got PJ to be there as well, but they brought all the companies through to go through the scene, even the companies that weren't there. And it was amazing the level of healing that had. And if I didn't reach out to Dennis, I wouldn't have been able to call the chief and say, hey, this would be a good idea to do. This worked in other departments. And I didn't think he was going to give me like something groundbreaking. And here, I never heard of that before. I would have never came up with that in a million years. But I was like, that's something that had a lot of value.
That was Chief Rubin with Firefighter Solomon, line of duty death in Atlanta. And what I like to tell people is you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And when you're involved in that incident, you can't take care of other people because you've got to take care of yourself first.
Yeah. No, great. It's been great talking with you guys. Leave us with something. You're not leaving FDIC, but leave the viewers with something.
Well, if you're viewing this and you're not here, book your travel, register for next year. This is a place that you should be. For opportunities like this, to meet you guys, to have these conversations, to attend the classes, to go to the social events. If you're not FDIC, do everything you can to be here and take care of yourself. And the last thing is remember that we all signed up for this job. We know the dangers, we know the risks, but the individuals that didn't sign up for that is our families. So we owe it to our families to reduce our risk and to take care of ourselves for them.
Frank?
Take care of each other. Go to the bookstore. Get PJ Norwood's book. Pick up my book, Command Presence. You won't learn anything, but I'll entertain you. And Daniel has a great ending of the chapter there. And it's just been an honor to be on your show and honor to be here at FDIC with you guys. And, just talk to each other. It goes a long way. Thank you.
Take care of yourself. The responsibility starts with you. One thing I'll say real quick is, and I know I've said this before, and he might roll his eyes when I say this, but you hear Dan, 97 firehouses, ran the EAP in Chicago, you guys. And one thing that you hear is you don't have to do it alone and courageous, the theme of the show, right? Like, who would ever think you would call somebody else to help you? Like, surely Chicago's got it figured out, right? Connecticut, Texas. So be courageous in your mental health, and you don't have to do it alone.
This is the greatest job in the world, and as they all just said, take care of yourself, and the job will take care of you as well. Don't be afraid to reach out, and it's been a pleasure sitting with you.
It's our pleasure as well.
And as PJ said, if you're not here this year, come next year, or get your training officer to support it.
Yeah. However you do it, get here. This is the place to be.
I love that. All right.
All right.